Welcome, everyone, to Monday Afternoon Roundtable. Good episode today. Looking forward to this one.
Yep.
It's kind of front and center in the United States right now. So, Jason, I'm going to turn it over to you. We're going to talk about workplace violence. So you've done a lot of research on it.
Yeah, workplace violence, specifically with the events that happened in Louisville at the bank. It was a former employee that did the shooting. Like you said, it's a relevant topic for today, but this is something that's been around for a long time that people don't realize. I don't know if you remember, and this is not a knock against the Postal Service, but the term going postal come from, I want to say the late 80s, early 90s, where there were 2 or 3 incidents where former employees went to, and they were postal employees, went back and shot up their place where they were employed. To me, that was the first kind of recognition or it's kind of defined as something, even though it was a loose terminology. The way they are categorizing this, and I was new to this as far as researching this today. I've done a lot of stuff from a law enforcement point of view as active shooter, but they're characterizing workplace violence in 3 different categories. They're saying psychological, physical, and sexual. We think mainly of the physical, but sometimes the psychological and the sexual can lead to retaliatory physical workplace violence. There's a lot of statistics here, and I've got several. I'm not going to read all the sources, but they're reliable sources, Gallup, just different security, legal jobs, all kinds of different Business Insider for these statistics. Most businesses do not report workplace violence that does not result in either a death or serious injury. To me, that's problematic because these little problems turn into big problems. And the reason they're not reporting them is lack of communication, fear of taking action, or lack of awareness. They don't want it to look bad on their business. Now, worldwide, 23% of employees worldwide, or roughly 743 million people, have experienced some form of workplace violence or harassment. Now, they're including harassment in that because it can lead to the violence. 32% experience more than one type of workplace violence or harassment. We're talking about the psychological, physical, or sexual. 6.3% said they had experienced all 3 types. 1 out of 7 people do not feel safe in their workplace. As of January 2022, only 45% of the people polled were aware of their company's safety plan, and we're going to go into that a little bit further as we go. What industry do you think makes up the most of these workplace violence situations?
Good question.
Hospitals.
Is it the hospitals? Okay.
What was you going to say?
And go before hospitals, you go back to your first responders, your paramedics. The paramedic goes into that person's home or business. That's his,
And specifically, it's healthcare workers, but then they say they make up 50% of the victims. And nurses make up more than doctors because they're more interactive.
Right.
70% of ER or emergency department nurses have been assaulted on the job.
I can see that.
47% of ER doctors have been assaulted. And I've seen this and you've seen it firsthand from calls, but my wife also works in the emergency room, and she's told me about situations and things like that because it's a volatile situation.
Yeah.
Let's see. Q4 of 2021, nurses showed over 30% increase in attacks against them. The reasons being were the COVID outbreak, vaccines, opioid and fentanyl overdoses, and abuse. It's what they're assuming. 44% of school teachers also report attacks in the workplace. However, most teachers do not report lower level attacks, which again are problematic because then it could lead to higher level attacks. 7% of all fatalities that occurred in the workplace have been the result of either hitting, kicking, beating, or pushing, some sort of hands-on-hands assault. Worldwide, 6.3% of workers have experienced sexual violence and harassment in the workplace. 8.2% of women and 5.0% of men. Also worldwide, 17.9% of the global workforce has experienced psychological violence or harassment. What do you think the most prevalent form of psychological harassment is?
Cyber.
Cyber is important, yeah, and we'll get into that on one of my later statistics. Cyberbullying, bullying, then cyberbullying. Form of bullying can be name calling, making fun of people, whatever. But the cyber increased via Zoom meetings and working from home over that was a contributing factor. 8.5% of global workforce has had cases of physical violence or harassment. Men are more than women are likely to be victims in this category. 30,000 females in the United States reported sexual assault in the workplace. 23% of females said sexual harassment has gotten worse since the pandemic. 42% of this says it's happening online. It says working from home has made the situation worse. 60.4 million Americans have been bullied at their workplace. Could include work sabotage, threats, verbal abuse, humiliating behavior, any form of intimidation based on race, gender, or sexual orientation. And this leads to anxiety, depression, health issues, and an increase in more severe workplace violence. 23.3% of employees said they've gotten bullied via email. Could include gossip or being yelled at also. 35% of workplace violence shows injuries to the head. 21% show injuries to the upper body. 14% show injuries on the trunk. And 7% show injuries on the lower body. There are 2 million victims of workplace violence each year in the United States. Globally, 68% of the workers do not feel safe at work.
All right.
That's high.
That's globally too. You got to take in consideration some places are just more dangerous than America, believe it or not, to live. Workplace violence results in $130 billion lost every year. Attacks on medics, responding paramedics, cost hospitals and medical industry $53.7 million a year. The average employee in their career in the medical field, in their career, takes 112.8 hours off due to job-related brutality, which includes depression, burnout, stress, or which can lead to depression, burnout, stress, and job dissatisfaction. In 2021, there were 481 workplace homicides in the United States. The prior year, in 2020, there were only 392 workplace homicides in the United States. They went up 89 more homicides in a year. 2021, there were 387 cases of intentional workplace shootings resulting in a death of at least one victim. Now, let's see. The different dangers that workplaces can face are by criminals, which can include robberies, thefts, or active shooter, dangerous customers or clients, worker-to-worker violence, domestic violence, and ideological violence. What you can do, and I'm just going to hit on it briefly and then we'll talk about it more so, is have a standard written policy and follow the policy. Practice it. Report violations. Communicate. Treatment of anybody that's been victimized, and stop small problems before they become big problems. Those are statistics, and now we can just talk and elaborate on it more, however y'all want to, go from there.
But I think it's workplace violence. You were talking about earlier. At one point, DWI was the big
thing for long.
Yeah, it was the number one issue. So many people were dying as a result of driving while impaired.
Changed the way law enforcement.
Right. And then Tim or one of you were talking about domestic violence, how that kind of started playing a part in the way policies were written in workplace, how response, different things. Now we have mental health issues, but I think the active shooter / workplace violence is top top right now. Number one issue facing not only law enforcement but the private sector, in professional businesses, any type of business for that matter. But I think that's where we are currently.
And to look at the good points of that, I think where we're doing well as a society as active shooters is law enforcement trained, first responders training, school personnel being trained, church personnel being trained. Where we're weak at is private businesses being trained and responding to that.
They got to accept it first.
Yeah, they have to accept it as a
Recognize
reality.
and say, yeah, this is going on, and let's do something about it.
Right.
In podcast I was listening to dealing with this same subject matter, the expert was talking about when he goes in to do an assessment, which is a big component of doing any kind of pre-planning or workplace violence policy. You have to assess where your issues are, where your soft points are, and where your strengths are. But he was talking about the companies that he was working for would sometimes say, no, you're opening our door to too much liability because we can't, put a firewall up that'll, protect against a large explosion or other things that were going to cost extraordinary costs. He couldn't do, and he recognized that and kind of changed his approach, how he would deliver the plan,
his final result.
his assessment, his report to the company saying, okay, here are the things you can do. But as Tim said, first you got to recognize, then you got to have a plan in place. Prevention's key, and then mitigate when something does happen, and then your after action plan. How did you do in putting it all together? But prevention is the key, in my opinion, and so much of it can be prevented just by listening. If you hear something, say something. That's the big thing right now people are talking about. You talk about the ideological end of it. That's a big issue, I think, right now because of social media, all the personal ideals that people may have, whether it's political, whether it's from the religious spectrum or whatever it may be. They voice those concerns, and they hold all that in, and to the point where they can't control it anymore. They purchase a firearm and go out and do something terrible. It's and then that leads to the active shooter situation that we're experiencing right now, and I think we're already off the chart this year already in 2023 compared to 2022 in the active shooter. It's every week we're seeing one, and the latest one was the bank at Louisville. And I don't know if you watched the video on it or any of the body-worn cameras, but those officers, the rookie officer, had been on the job, 10 days?
10 days.
Yeah. Shot in the head, unfortunately. I think he's going to survive. I hope he does, and I pray that he does. But it showed all that on that body-worn camera. They did what they were supposed to do. They were approaching the shooter, going after the shooter, but it was a pane glass where they couldn't see in, but the shooter could see out. And it was shadowed, and he shot out the windows. But when he did, and that's when the officer was shot. But they were able to return fire.
And going on that shadowed window, that is a crime prevention technique by environmental design. That's taught. A bank does that purposely. But in this case, it
worked
opposite.
Right. And I would have never thought that.
I would have never have either.
But I remember the training officer that was training the young man that was shot. He calls in. He says the reflective mirror on the glass, I couldn't see him. It was hiding him. And when the window was, when it was shot out, they were able to see him and they took him down. But those numbers and those stats are, I didn't know that they were as high as they were. I knew workplace violence was prevalent, and I knew that it was an issue going on in many of the workplace, but I didn't know it was that high. So it's just, again, the policy's got to be there. It's got to be well written, thought about, but it's got to be followed. In other words, if the policy's there, then the company's got to recognize it and understand it and be able to follow it. But the key comes down is when it hits the fan. What are you going to do? How are you going to handle it? And let's talk about that for just a minute. We've heard all the police talk about run, hide, and fight. Those are the three elements that they talk about. In the run situation, and I've heard Tim tell his son sometimes if something happens, you go to the back exit. Run from the situation where it's going on, especially if you're unarmed and you need to get out of the line of fire. And this is what they're teaching the children in school now. If I'm not mistaken, they teach them to run, the first thing, and then to hide. But the hide situation, you got to hide in safest places you can find. And sometimes that might just be under a desk. It's the only time you have. And then the fights were there's a lot of controversy with that right now. But in my opinion, if you're to the point there's nothing left to do, you've got to fight, whether that's using a pencil in your hand and going for his eyes or doing whatever you have to do.
If that's all you have, use it.
That's all you have left.
Can I elaborate on those?
Sure.
I was one of the first. I was in the first class of active shooter instructors in North Carolina, and a lot of this has changed over the years. The run, hide, and fight. A couple things. If you run, if you're able to, if it's tactically possible, run in a zigzag, but that might be detrimental if you're trying to get from A to B the quickest point. Mm-hmm. But zigzag will at least make the shooter have to, adjust their aim point. Hiding, a lot of people outside of the military or first responders do not understand the concepts of concealment or cover or concealment. Cover stops bullets and concealment just hides. Obviously, cover is better, but if you can't, use concealment. Fighting, this is an absolute 100% last resort. You have no other choice. The great thing about all three of these is you're doing something. Don't just not do anything. Mm-hmm. If you freeze, the shooter's mindset is he's going in for easy targets. He's going to target things that are easy. He's not expecting a fight right initially. He's expecting police response. He knows that's going to happen, but he's not expecting, and I'm not encouraging people to, that is a last 100% resort. But if you do fight, do the best you can.
Mm-hmm. With that being said, what do you think about within the past 2 or 3 years, the message has come up arming teachers?
That's not necessarily a great idea. And I'll tell you, and we've talked about this, the reason being responding officers, if there's multiple people there that are armed, may take a good guy as the bad guy. They see the first armed person they see maybe
maybe a teacher running down the hall with a gun. What are the first two police officers going to do?
They're going to go to that part.
I disagree with it, Jason. I think it's a bad idea. I can see where they're coming from. The more guns from good people, the better it's going to be for the bad person. But that's where training comes back in, and then you've got the policy says that teacher shall have a gun. Well, then you have a student that acts up, that goes crazy in the class, knowing that teacher's got a gun and they can overtake that teacher. It's bad news. It doesn't make any sense, and I've heard it till I'm about sick of it because it's not a good policy.
It looks good on paper, but in practice, it's not going to work.
No,
it's going to cause more problems.
Right. And I know a lot of teachers, and I don't know of not one, and all of them will call me now and say, "Oh yeah, I'll take a gun if you give it to me." All those teachers said they're not in this business to carry guns.
Right.
They're in it to teach children. So it's a mindset, and people are kind of going on that bandwagon. Well, the more guns, the better. I disagree.
You can see, and we talked about this with the school shooting in, where was it at? Nashville a while back. That one teacher responded really well, given the information. You could tell she was trained.
She had some training. She used it.
She used it, and we've seen that. Like I said, we talked about schools, churches have had training. I've done response training for churches. I left out, hospitals are really trained well on it too.
Right.
But the private, they've got to have some, incorporated into your yearly training of some sort. It can be in progress disaster training. It could be a tornado, a fire, an active shooter. You can build it all similarly. I mean, types of response and just change it here and there for each one.
Right. And I'm sure the bank in Louisville, they figured that they were the last group that's ever going to have an active shooter in their business, just because it's a bank or whatever. But you don't need it till you need it.
Yeah, and I'm sure they're great at armed robbery response.
Probably.
That they could do that sitting, where you comply, let them know, do what do. They have a policy of what to do.
But this was a disgruntled employee coming back into the workplace and killing actually his friends and coworkers.
And
He was a young guy, was
yeah,
he
about
not?
25. And we've all three had experience, not just in law enforcement, but in our private investigative field, where we've worked details in which we've had the disgruntled employee fired, and we've done protection for, the maybe the HR director or an employee or the owner of the business, and even had to walk them out before, as they're fired.
Yeah, and that's always uncomfortable, but it's happened more and more. These HR directors are hiring armed people to come in, and when they bring that individual in, we did one several years ago where the CEO was being terminated, big company, and there were two of us on the scene with the HR director. They flew the HR person in from another state, and when he pulled up, he sees me. And it's, the first thing I asked him, "What the hell are you doing here?" And I said, "Well, you need to come in with me." And he got all personal and upset. We get inside, and he sees that we're not there to play. And because he was such a bully CEO, and it was obvious that was the reason they were firing him, because he was threatening other employees, threatening other executive people within the company. It was a big, big company. And so it took about 15 minutes for the HR director to do what she needed to do. And, we didn't let him clean his desk out. We didn't let him do anything. We escorted him back out, and we stayed on the premises for several days because they were worried about him coming back in retaliation. And that happens
Yeah, and even helping them.
at the bank.
Yeah, even helping them as far as what to expect. This is potentially going to happen A, B, and C. It may go sideways. It may not. What to do after the fact. You need to have a lawyer from the company send an official, you're banned from the property, all that kind of stuff. And there's a lot to it.
Right. And I think the run, hide, and fight issue comes in when you have these law enforcement agencies that come in to do the training with the school personnel, including the students, and they do blanks. I mean, I can see making it as real as possible, but making it so real that they have, psychological issues afterwards, or issues with the showmanship of trying to put this thing on to make it real. You have to be really careful.
Well,
it's a fine line there.
And you're damned if you do and damned if you don't.
Right,
if you do it, you may be giving a potential offender a playbook of what you're getting ready to do. I mean, but what do you do? I mean,
Training's critical. If they don't train, it's not going to be worth a damn. As Tim said, you can have the strongest policy in the world, and unless you train for it and you put it in place, and everyone in the organization understands it, it's not worth a hill of beans. But it's just one of those. I think we're going to see more and more opportunities for training. I think you're going to see people come on board, whether they're ex-law enforcement or security, whatever, that provide better training for these individuals, I hope.
Here's another thing I want to bring up. Companies should encourage all employees to have their cell phone with them, not to be using, when the time they're supposed to be at work, but to have them on their person in case something does go down. Even if your communication center is getting 10 calls from one location, even though they know something serious is going on,
Right.
whether they're just talking or whatever. So, that's a vital
That's a
thing.
good point. Mm-hmm.
I mean, at least allow them to, don't have a policy which says you can't bring it onto the property. You got to leave it in your car.
But one thing they have to do when they get in that hide mode is turn it on silent or off. Turn on silent. I would go down.
They should do that in practice. Every
right.
time they go in, make sure it's on silent.
One of the ladies in the bank shooting the other day, when she called 911, of course she's whispering, and you could hear the shots right outside wherever she was, and she's saying they're killing people. He's shooting people, and the telecommunicator told us, "Don't say anything else.
That's all we need to.
Just keep me on the line, but don't say anything else." And of course, officers responded.
And we've talked about this till we're blue in the face. A great telecommunicator is worth their weight in gold, and a telecommunicator is really your first responder. Even though they're not there, they're there. They're the ones. They're the most important at that moment.
But it's important from our end, like if we did a risk assessment on let's say an office complex, and you come in, you look at the exterior of the building, the parking, the entrance, the exits, the windows, everything about the infrastructure of the building, and then you got to work your way in. The rooms in the building. Is there a safe room people could hide and be secure? You've noticed some of the schools have gotten different locks on doors. different stops to where it prevents the door from being opened, or gives them more time. I think it's the key there is getting more time. There's a whole lot to do there, but I think if they do a good assessment from the front end, then they can build their policy off that assessment and the recommendations from the assessment and put a good plan together.
I think also it's going to get worse.
I agree.
And I think we're going to slowly start seeing more bombings instead of shootings.
I hope not.
Everywhere around the world, bombings are more prevalent than the shootings.
Well, because guns are hard to get in most places. Other than
They are, and
in America.
but a bomb can do more damage quicker. And it's
and you have a delay time.
Car bombing, suicide bombing, things like people are going to. They're going to start using that. Yeah, that's coming. That's going to happen here eventually.
Mm-hmm. And I hope not, but it very well could. And
I mean, the Boston bombing is the only one and the Oklahoma City are the only two main ones. But it's
the World Trade Center.
That's right.
The
first
83
one.
maybe.
No, it was 93.
93.
Yeah,
When they took the bomb into the basement.
Yeah, you're gonna have more people. And I'll tell you another reason why. A bomb is a coward's weapon because you can put it somewhere and you don't have to be there. You know what You can be a safe distance away, and that.
A lot of your active shooters go in with the mindset, I'm going to die today.
Mm-hmm.
It's a suicide by cop situation, and they just go ahead and accept it and say, well, it doesn't matter how many I kill or how many I shoot. I'm going to die at the end of this. I'm going to go out in a blaze of glory for the most part in their minds.
And they're going to shoot until they receive a threat, an active threat towards them, and it may be
any kind of resistance.
Yeah, it may be a citizen or it may be a law enforcement officer. Mm-hmm. You don't, and each individual offender is going to have a different threshold of what they consider the threat is.
I think the shooter in Nashville, the female shooter, I think she was surprised at the response. I think she was shooting out the window and turned around when those guys, the three guys came in and took her down. I think she was startled. I think she was surprised that anyone come in that quickly.
But we've had shootings in schools, churches, hospitals, malls, movie theaters,
soft points,
nightclubs,
soft targets.
Everything that in your everyday life, we've had it already.
And a lot of them are the ideological at the mosque and the gay bars, different organizations. The schools where the children go still baffles me. I can't figure that one out. And the bank, of course, was a disgruntled employee. But there's always some kind of sign there. There's always, just for example, we were talking about it at lunch. On Facebook, a friend was talking about suicide. One of them people on Facebook, and I'm going, how bizarre. I reported that message, and hopefully someone got this lady some help. But that's one of the first things they do is they cry out, and people fail to recognize it and fail to report it, and
that could open up some liability because I know all government jobs have employee assistance programs. I don't know if all private ones, but if they should, larger ones should.
They should, and yes, most do. I think OSHA requires it now. But the problem is sometimes it's so detailed and so many red tape that you got to follow and all the things you got to do, and they're not comfortable with it.
And they say it's what is it? It's I'm lack of a word. It's confidential. Mm-hmm. But you got to go through 17 people to get it. So how confidential is it going to be?
And they're afraid if they go, especially if it's mental health, and they go and say, I need help, then it's going to get out to the rest of the. In some places that would happen. I know it would. In some places.
Well, let's look at mental health in the workplace. In the workplace, you get insurance for 2 physicals a year, right, or maybe 1. You get it for 2 dental appointments a year, cleanings and checkups. Eye doctors a year, but you don't. There's no preventative mental,
Right.
If they would take the stigma away from it, then people would use it. I don't know the answer I don't know how to do that. But
it's something that's I don't think it's going to change overnight, and I think, like you said, it's going to get much worse. But our government and our policymakers have got to recognize that guns. That's one of the problems. That's what everybody's using right now. It's not explosives. It's firearms.
The problem is what can they? I mean,
Red flag laws for one. I swear I think that would help. It may piss some people off, and it may it may hurt the wrong people sometimes. Okay, but that can be fixed. But a red flag, I think, especially if a person has had some kind of issues in the past, whatever they may be, I think that would. Does that individual need a gun right then? There should be a waiting period.
I understand that. I don't foresee that as and that should be. I mean, you don't want anybody who's having issues to have a firearm.
No.
I just worry sometimes legislation is just for show and say, hey, we done something, but is it?
Well, that's where we are right now. It's a showboat because nothing's getting done, and there's kids dying every day because of shootings. And the one of the ER doctors at the University of Louisville talked about in his press conference. He said, "I'll be honest with you. This is a daily activity for us here." Yeah. He said they come in. We have mass shootings all the time. They're not all together in one shooting. They'll come in different. He said, but we may have 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 in the emergency room at one time. He said, so we really didn't deviate from our day-to-day plan. That's sad.
Sad. He said that. He said somebody told him he looked like he was tired. He said, "I'm not tired. I'm weary." He said, "I'm tired of this happening."
Yeah, and he's a good spokesperson for what can happen and what is happening. Hell, not what can, what is. And I don't know. I don't have the answer. I really don't, and I wished I did. But it's just I think gun ownership and gun training and purchases of guns, I think it's out of control. I think the industry has such a stronghold on our government representatives because of lobbying. And because of money, donations, and we've seen it. We know what it's there. And if you don't support the NRA, then here's the deal. When I ran for office, the NRA sent me a questionnaire. It was I think 50 pages. Literally, it was several dozen pages that I had to fill out and go through and check. And I said, I knew my chances of winning were slim to none because of my location and where I was in the district. And who I was. But the thing was, I said, I'm going to fill this questionnaire out as if I am Matt Dillon or I'm Billy the Kid. I love guns and, let God pry it out of my dead fingers or whatever. I did it that way on purpose to see what kind of grade I would get from the NRA, knowing that the only thing, here's the deal. I checked everything from a most conservative gun ownership perspective. And you carry guns in a courthouse? Yes. Could anybody buy guns? Yes. I checked everything. My grade was a B minus. B minus. And just because I had a different political affiliation beside my name is what brought my grade down, because that was the only thing it could have been. But they posted all those grades nationwide. Everybody that was running for office that year, the NRA, fuck the NRA. That's the way I feel about them. I don't like the NRA. I think they've caused all these problems. I think their lobbying issues and all their money have come in along with the gun manufacturers. We have guns. We carry guns. We own guns. I got a lot of them. You got a lot of them. My friends have them. Do we need them? Yes, we need them. But there's got to be a control. There's got to be a check and balance. And if we don't have it, then we're going to continue to have active shooters. We're going to continue to have 6 and 9-year-olds killed at school, children killed at church because of guns. And I think it's reckless. I think it's the group. I think we put the NRA and the gun manufacturers on a pedestal and think that they're protected because of our constitutional rights. I believe in the Constitution. I think right to bear arms is critical. I believe that. Nobody's trying to take anybody's guns away, but we got to have some kind of control to bring this issue down. And I apologize for
I understand exactly what you're saying. I just a lot of gun legislation doesn't work. And I mean, I don't.
It's because they water it down. They don't take it serious.
And what argument can you make? Is it unconstitutional with it? I mean, there's been no set ruling. There have been set rulings, but it fluctuates on what the Second Amendment. gives you.
But I think we have to remember when the Second Amendment was written, we were using flint rock type weapons, one single shot.
I'll be a counterpoint to that.
Okay.
When it was written, black people couldn't vote. They were slaves.
Women couldn't vote.
Right, I agree. So there needs to be changes,
And that would require an amendment, which requires 2/3 of the states.
which will never happen.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. That's my point.
And you're right.
I'm not being a dick.
No,
I'm just
you're right.
I'm being practical.
You're exactly right, and that's where we are right now, and that's why we're not going to make any headway until the smart people of this world can figure out, here's what we got to do, and you know how they can do that? Vote.
No.
Register and go vote.
They can vote, and they can. It doesn't matter what party it is,
Yeah.
but you get a candidate who's up there saying, "I'm not here to take your guns. I'm here to protect children, and I'm here to have some kind of protocol on semi-automatic military-style rapid-fire weapons." And why do these people need that?
All right. What are you going to do with all the
ones that are already there? Well, that's where we got to, okay, we're not there to take those guns, but they need to say, okay, do you have the training to shoot to fire that weapon? Yes or no? Or we grandfather it in and we got to start somewhere.
I agree with that.
I'm not for the, somebody in a black truck pulling up to my house and saying, I need all your guns, give them here. The Gestapo. That's where the one side wants to put everything right now, and that's ridiculous, but that's not where we are. But that's what they're using in counter argument sometimes, and I don't like that. So
a criminal or somebody that's mentally having a breakdown is not going to follow the law, and you can get a gun quicker than you can get buy a beer.
True, but the problem is it's not the criminals that are buying these military-style semi-automatic weapons. It's a person that goes to church on Sunday that's just pissed off at his coworkers, and he goes and buys it legally, and kills several people.
And they're not mentally ill till one day.
Too late.
Yeah, I mean, how is that red flag law going to work?
It's not going to work every time, but it might work once or twice or 10 times. And I think once they get it down. And it's going to be argued. It's going to be, oh, God, it'll be torn to shreds, the argument with it. And I can see that with these individuals who may have, 25 years ago sought psychological or was committed for whatever reason. And now they can't have a handgun or a gun at all. So, same thing with convicted felons. It's just, it's something that we've got to change what we're doing, because what we're doing is not working right now. And
I agree with that. And I think all sides are to blame. I'm basically at the point where I don't know what you can do.
Well, what about the holding the gun manufacturers accountable for their advertising techniques?
And that's went
their
to
macho.
court.
Yeah, it has.
What do you do next, though? Do you hold a TV show or a movie accountable for using a Remington, 870 shotgun in a movie that?
True, right.
I mean, where a kid says, "Oh, I'll even tell you one." There was a kid broke into a pawn shop in Caldwell County 30 years ago and stole a handgun. The reason he stole the handgun was because it was the Beretta 92F that was used in Lethal Weapon movie. That was the only reason he broke in to get that gun. Do you hold the producers of Lethal? I mean, I don't. I'm playing devil's advocate.
All right, and I see what you're saying, and I recognize it. You'll remember the Stoneman Douglas High School shooting in Florida. Those kids, they didn't sit on their tails.
No,
they got
they
up
didn't.
and started. They went to Washington. They formed a group, and they made a difference.
I agree with that.
But their voices were kind of overshadowed by all the other stuff, even the stuff that's happening in Tennessee right now. Let's talk about that for just a minute with the three state legislators, 2 black men and 1 white lady, were supporting the students that were there protesting in the General Assembly
Peacefully.
in the hall in the General Assembly chambers. One was using a bullhorn, I think. And so they were or 2 of those, the 2 black men were expelled or relieved of their duties there as legislators. Now they've since been returned, and rightfully so. But I think the protests, the racial component of it overshadowed the gun violence issue a little bit, and I think they recognize that, and they keep talking about these two men. Both of them are named Justin, I think. Yeah, both of them are saying, let's don't lose sight of why we're
what
doing
the problem
this.
was.
And kudos to them, because they're saying this. We're here because of what happened at the church, at the church school, and we're trying to prevent gun violence. Yes, there was all kind of racial innuendos based on this dismissal of us or relieved of our duties because we're protesting in the hall, but.
And that goes back to the point you did make, what people can do. I asked that question about 10 minutes ago, and you brought up the best answer, both of you did, is vote, is to get organized. Those legislatures that were helping or taking part in the protest did nothing wrong. They violated a policy, and I don't mind them getting reprimanded, maybe whatever, but not
right,
but not expelled. That's going against their freedom of speech,
right,
and the freedom of assembly. And
it was
they
overkill for sure.
they may got out of order, as you do, or out of line, or being loud, but they didn't do anything that deserved expulsion.
They were violating quorum.
Yeah,
or whatever.
Yeah, slap them. I mean, do what you do. All right, you might be censored for a month, or whatever.
Or taken off a committee, maybe.
Yeah, I don't. That was completely wrong. That or two wrongs don't make a right.
Right.
And that was just overkill.
But let's go a step further. They relieved the two black men of their post as their legislative duties, but they kept the white female, and she was just as loud and voiced as they were.
The vote she won her vote by one.
By one, yes.
Oh, it don't take a lot of scientific data to figure
No,
that
it
one
doesn't.
out.
And she explained why she didn't get expelled.
But she's been right there with them the entire time and support. She was a retired school teacher who was involved in an active shooter at one time at her school. And so she recognizes it and understands it and been there.
I'm all for assembly, protest, organization, registering to vote. I don't care if somebody says something I 100% disagree with. They have a right to say it as long as they don't.
do.
That as long as they don't, they're not doing it inciting a riot. There was no inciting there. There was no
weapons,
no violent talk, no.
Yeah, what's the Supreme Court's ruling? You can't scream fire in the movie house. And that's where we are right now. And they weren't doing any of that.
No.
They were protesting an incident that happened within their jurisdiction, if you will.
And another thing that scared people that voted for the expulsion is not just their skin color, was their age. They both were in their 20s.
Yeah.
Well-spoken, smart.
Educated. They're good guys.
Yeah, I was extremely proud of them and what they did, what they stood up for. And we're going to catch some heat probably over this by saying that. But I think what they did was the right thing to do. The right thing to do, and it's going to show, and it's going to – but you got to remember, Tennessee's they have a supermajority, and they're the governor, the House, and the Senate. Every elected position in Tennessee's a Republican, and it's about that way in a lot of different states. But North Carolina has a Democrat governor, Republican Senate and House. Is that right? I think.
Yes.
Yeah, but it's close in the House, I think. But anyhow, it's just that's where we are right now with political divide. We talked about that a little bit last week, and I'm not going to delve on that. I'm not going to get too deep into that. But I think that's where we are, and that's where, that's what it's going to lean to. I think we're going to see more of it.
And it's an assault on constitutional rights, the way I look at it. And I look at it the same way as the guns. Until we can figure out, you have people taking away rights of if they can have certain medical care. And I have religious beliefs just like anybody, but there's things that are none of my business.
Mm-hmm.
There's none of my business of who sleeps with who, what you do. That's not it doesn't affect me. And I don't think it's the government's business to know who does what as far as that kind of stuff. And, what books I read or what books you read or who's in your bedroom or what you're going to do with if you're pregnant. I worry about that same issue with the gun thing.
It's front and center, Jason. That's where it is. It's
I know,
right there with those things you just talked about.
You're right, and
if not the first thing.
And that's my point.
I think it's right behind. I think it's the second. I think abortion's first, and I think the guns are.
There's assaults on the Constitution from all different angles, from every which way but loose.
Yeah. I agree. And I think we're our own worst enemy.
I do too. I think we're at a point that we're never have seen before, and I don't know. I think I'm worried it's going to cause such a big cut that's going to cause a scar that's going to be hard to deal with. I don't know what. I don't know. I just don't know.
Mm-hmm. But let's go back to the NRA for just a minute. Look what good they could do if they would put those resources instead of the trips for their executive director and all the money that goes in that's not accounted for, and the bankruptcy and all the other stuff that they've done. But look at the good that they could do with
Education
gun safety,
and
education.
And they used to be.
They did.
Yeah, they used to have it in the schools.
That's
They had
right.
hunter, gun safety, hunter safety, fishing safety,
just
boater
like driver's
safety.
license,
Everything they
driver's
could do.
ed, and other things you did, and but now it's all political and it's all one sided pretty much. So anyhow, this has been a hot little topic, of course, and we all three have our opinions on this, and that's why I wanted to talk about it. And Jason, you did a lot of work on the research, and I think this is ready for another day. I think we can talk about this one on
we can
multiple
talk about
episodes.
this
Yeah. And I'd like to bring in maybe an expert that's kind of done one of those assessments in detail and see if they'd come on board and talk to us about it. And
I would love to have somebody come on too that would disagree with what we say. I mean, we've disagreed amongst ourselves in here, but even more so, I think, not to be combative, not to be confrontational, but just to get.
okay, I got an answer to that. Hold on a minute. Hell no. I know what you're saying, yeah, and it would. But you know how we can be sometimes.
You're right. We can be
So-
just at fault as much as the other person, and we would have to.
Oh, I'd love to have someone to
Just I
argue
like
with a little bit, but
I like to have different points of view.
it's according to what the subject matter is, I guess.
And-
This is a little bit too edgy.
It is right now.
And it's too political, and so. But yeah, I agree. And we talked about the political spectrum, bringing in candidates later on when the election.
Yeah, and that
year
might be a
cranks
great.
up.
Both sides, all sides.
Sure.
And it's not going to be a hit job. Just let's hear what you got to say. We might disagree with something, but we're not going to, run you down or anything like that. But it would be a discussion. It wouldn't be as long as we gave each side an opportunity.
Yeah.
They could turn it down.
Changing the subject, I heard you ran in a marathon. 10K? 5K?
No, I didn't run it.
A marathon?
No, I ran 9 miles.
9 miles.
Who was chasing you?
That's a half.
It was
marathon.
now to be. I want to give some clarifications here. It was on a treadmill, so it was perfect conditions. It was inside. It was flat surface. It was soft surface. I jogged 2 hours, about a 14-minute pace per mile. Jogged 9 miles. I'm trying to get up to a half marathon. That's my goal, is to run a half marathon in Mount Airy on my birthday, my 50th birthday.
That'd be good.
That's my bucket list. So
Tim can't even drive 9 miles
Yeah,
without
as
getting
long
tired.
As long as my John Deere works, I ain't running nowhere.
I'm gonna have to transition though from inside to outside because it's a lot different.
If you see Tim Money running, you better look out.
Somebody's chasing him.
Somebody's after him with a big gun.
The good thing about jogging, and I don't run, I jog, is it gets your heartbeat enough where the only thing you really want to do is concentrate on breathing, form,
Not dying.
and you don't worry about guns or politicians or
School shootings.
yeah. It takes your mind off your stress.
So-
You're doing something positive, and you're getting your heart. It relaxes me.
But you've lost quite a bit of weight over this training, and you can tell.
Well,
you kind of got Tim and I on the. train
I hit a
on the
midlife.
bandwagon.
I hit a midlife crisis,
I hit that a long time ago.
and I had no desire to cheat on my wife. Like a lot, you know what I'm saying? Where you think, oh, the younger women. You always hear the song.
They buy you a Corvette.
That was what I wanted to do. I wanted to get a sports car. That was what I was a year ago. I was like, man, I want an old classic Mustang. I just want to do that's what, but I couldn't afford it. So I thought, well,
I'll lose weight.
I thought I about pass out when I tie my shoes, so I'm gonna just be healthier. That was my midlife crisis, and it's working.
That's why Tim and I have these loafers that you don't have to tie. You don't have to bend down. You just
We're
slip
over
on.
1,100 members.
Yeah, that's a great
true.
sign. Yeah,
We're growing.
Man, we're getting some people send us their ideals and what they'd like to see.
and we're working on those. We're
Yeah,
kinda lining
some
that
of
up.
them. The last week, request. It's going to take some study and some research. And
I definitely would like to have a guest on that one. It's dealing with autism,
Yes.
recognition and response, and how law enforcement handles it, how the courts handle it, and it's a big issue right now.
It sure is.
Especially in North Carolina, because we have such good training here. That's why a lot of families move to North Carolina with autistic children and autistic people. So it was a good recommendation, and we're gonna put something together really well. But what we got on last call today? Well, another Crown, I hope.
Crown Royal Black.
Crown Black.
Okay. We've gone through a lot of different blends and different things, but the black's something new we'll try. And
We're on the Canadian kick right now. You
Yeah,
seen
I
those
love
Crown
the
Royal
Canadians.
commercials with the that's really good.
one of my Canadian friends sent us a really good kudos the other day. Said that he enjoys the show. He's a farmer and he's out working in his field and he listens to it on his ear pods and said he enjoys it. I think he's up to episode 9. He said, so keep listening, Ken Luderbach. We love you too. So, but it's we have fun doing it. It's something good for us. Once a week we get together and we do this, and so we hope our listeners and viewers like it. So we're going to take a break just for a minute, and we're going to come back and do last call. Thanks again for joining us.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye. Welcome back, everyone. Our favorite part,
Last call.
All right.
Monday afternoon roundtable. We got Crown Royal Black today, Jason.
Do you think it's going to be better than the Crown Royal Reserve we had?
I can already tell you because I've drank it before.
Oh,
But
okay.
they're all good. Any Crown Royal's good. It's good Canadian whiskey.
Yeah, we're about turning into Canadian.
I know, that's right, because it's
But it's
so
good.
Tell you a little bit about it. The Crown Royal Black is robust and full-bodied, matured in perfection in charred oak barrels, blended at a higher proof for a deep, full-bodied flavor, rich texture, and a signature smoothness. This can only be Crown Royal blended Canadian whiskey. So, I mean, they're proud of their product as they should be. It's a 90 proof blended whiskey. I've had the black, so I know you're going to like it. We had the reserve last week, so
Yeah.
it's hard to beat that reserve.
Yeah, that was
it's
a good-
just a good blend of whiskey. And Tim, let me have your glass. I'll pour this week.
I've got the bottle at the house. Once we reach 2,000, it'll be the Crown XR.
2,000 members.
Yes.
Yeah, that's the top of the line.
Yeah, XR is extra rare, and it's a high dollar bottle. It's a dark color.
Yeah, the black. That's why they call it the black, because it's got some deep colors with it. That charred oak barrel brings that out, and I know you're going to smell the flavors.
It smells good.
Good podcast today. A little controversial, but that's okay. That's what it's about. We talked about
Real good.
workplace
Workplace
violence. Yeah.
Among other
I
things.
thought about since we've left, the podcast. Our office here are 8 offices, a break room, and a conference room, and 2 bathrooms, and we, as a group, have practiced active shooter
Yeah. We
Yeah.
talked about what
in,
we
in
would
our
do.
small office. So that's something
That's true.
we have practiced. What are you going to do? Where are you going to be? What are you going to do if you're here?
Well, the office we're in, the structure of it put us in a bad situation because we're one way in, one way out with the steps. We're on the second floor. So, yeah.
But we also chose our offices strategically. Like we didn't choose front offices. We at least got that hallway where we can see.
Yeah.
And then we have an alarm system when they walk in the door that notifies us and lets us know. And we probably need to do more. Our policy probably needs to be a little better, but to what we have, because it's just this kind of business we're in, just the nature of the business. There are going to be some disgruntled clients from time to time, especially from on the other side.
Yeah.
They could come in
And like we talked about, the world we live in, every business is going to have something disgruntled, somebody.
Yes. That's why communications is important. Policy is important.
right.
Practice, training.
Some of those deep blended whiskeys that's been in the charred oak barrels, sometimes got a little bite and burns on the back of your tongue or going down your throat. I don't feel
not
that with
there,
this
yeah.
at all. It's
especially for a 90 proof.
That's a 90 proof, but it's smooth, isn't it?
It's very smooth.
And that's what Crown Royal is about. You know, their whiskey is so good. They've done it for so long, and their brewmaster knows what he's doing, and they got a really good team. That'd be a good, fun company to work for, I'm sure.
Oh, yeah.
Put our brochure up there.
Yeah, Jason got us some new brochures this week. It's kind of incorporates all of our 3 companies into one and tells about who we are, what we do.
We also got in the works a website in the works that's going to, instead of having all 3 of our websites, we're going to have one kind of all together. And that's that's coming up soon too.
And this is, this is in between our regular assignments that we have and our responsibilities that we have. We try to do advertising a little bit, and we try to get our work plan together. And
yeah, and I want to give a shout out. Dara's Designs is the one that did this for us out of Conover.
Who is it again?
Dara.
Daria?
It's Dara.
Dara.
Dara's Designs, and she does great work.
Yeah, she does. We got a cool picture.
She's real
on there.
professional when she comes and sells her product.
The picture of all of us, the Munday clan there. It's kind of funny. We showed that in one of our episodes.
Yeah.
It's got Dad in it. Tim and I much younger. Jason looks like he's 12. So anyhow, yeah, it's a pretty cool little brochure. We'll send you a copy if you want one. And so, what are you giving this score? Crown Royal Black, Tim.
9.
Okay. Jason.
I like it better than last week's.
Do you?
And I gave last week a 9.5, I think. So I'm gonna give it a 9.75.
9 3/4.
Yep.
We gotta save some of those high 9s for
I know.
Crown XR.
Well, it might be an 11. How's that?
Yeah.
I'm just waiting for us to have one that sucks.
And that's when we're gonna go. Well, we haven't had a bad one yet. That vodka we drank that day was a little different because we're not used to drinking vodka. But
I'm bringing vodka. It's a
hell no.
red-eyed Louis. It's a mixture of vodka and tequila, and we're gonna take a small sample of that.
That'll be some different one.
We might have to hit the hell no button on that.
Well, we might like it. You never know.
I doubt it.
Jason and Tim, I'm gonna give it a 9.5. It's that good.
It's very good.
highly recommend. You're not gonna go wrong again with Crown Royal, so you can't beat it. So yeah, that's where we are. Anything coming up on the burner? You got travels this week. You got to go out of town.
Yeah, I'm going out of town on some workman's comp case.
You can do all those you want because those are
I know
hard.
they're difficult. They very are.
They're challenging.
They require a little more evidence, a little more specific evidence.
Right.
We're looking to grow a little bit. Hopefully, my guy passes the board next Wednesday, so hopefully we'll know something. Your guy, the new guy that's maybe coming on with us, I think will be a
Be an asset for us.
very big asset. I think he's top of the line in his field. So
I agree.
We can talk more about him later on.
That should be a podcast on its own.
Right, and we will. And he's a squared away young man, and I'm looking forward to him. We're going to talk to him in a couple weeks or next week, hopefully, and see what we can do. But we're all the time looking for good people, and I think we got a pretty good team right now.
Yeah.
So anyhow, it's been a good one. Highly recommend the Crown Royal Black. Join us next week. We got a couple different episodes. We haven't picked which one we're going to do next week.
Yeah,
we got a few that we want to talk about. David Dufresne's coming back on the book.
Yeah, hopefully I got the book in the office.
Okay.
I was doing some research. It was, and I was doing
David Childers, he's with God Sent the Dog.
Yeah, we wanted. That was one of our most popular episodes, so we're going to try to do a follow up on
do
that.
a second show on that.
We're looking at the autism awareness.
The unsolved murder in our hometown.
Yeah,
we're still working on that. You're looking at 3 separate agencies that we're trying to get together for that episode, and that's hard to get those guys all at one time to say, I can meet that day.
And again, we're going to go back to some of our true crime stuff. We're going to hit some of the cases and bring back some things that we were originally talking about. But we've had such good success on some of these issues, the current trends that are going on right now, and we wanted to talk about them and bring it front and center. And I think we have. And it's I just glad people taking the time to listen and to watch our episodes.
And we really enjoy when the viewers or listeners reach out and say a suggestion, like we had Kim do about the autism, or a suggestion about a drink or a topic, anything. We're all about the interaction with you guys, and because you guys take care of us. You're liking, sharing, subscribing, commenting, and we're growing, and that's what we want. So
One group I want to start attracting is maybe those guys that are just, and girls that are just getting involved in the private investigative industry and saying, you know, let's listen to these three old guys and see what they've done, because there's been a lot of trial and error in our lives, and we can tell you what's good and what's not, because by God, we've tried most of it.
And we've made some mistakes here,
sure
you know,
we have,
bumps in the road. So hopefully they can learn from us.
And we'll see. But anyhow, again, thanks for joining us. Look forward to seeing you next time. Monday afternoon roundtable. Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.